Gerard Schaefer joined the police force to serve and protect. At least that's what he told everyone. He wore the badge, filed the reports, and pulled over young women under the pretense of safety. There was just one problem. He wasn't there to protect them. He was hunting them. When the bodies started turning up, fiction and reality became impossible to separate. Join me, Susan Davis, every week on Unlawful Acts, as we dig into stories that look one way on the surface, but reveal something far more sinister underneath. We're not just here to recount crimes, we're here to understand them, one episode at a time. As one listener put it, this is the podcast for people who crave the full story, without the filler. Tune in to Unlawful Acts wherever you get your podcasts.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Episode 14 of The Messenger, the Rachel Cancer Scam. On this episode of The Messenger, one of the most critical pieces of this podcast from the first written word has been this relationship with my friend Matt. He's served as a writer, a producer, and an advisor. He's gifted in so many ways, and I'm grateful for the friendship. That friendship goes back over a quarter of a century, and he knows the story better than anyone. And I wanted to take the opportunity to sit and talk with him and allow him to go through social media direct messages and other questions that folks have. And today, we're going to do that. We're going to do that right now. I don't know if this is my interview or it's your interview or what the story is, but I'm going to give you the floor.
I spent a decent amount of time. We've been talking about doing this forever, but I spent a decent amount of time looking through your DMs, going through your questions. I know that people have a lot of comments, but also there's a lot of questions that you get that would take you 10 minutes to answer, and you really haven't had a platform to answer those. And I think it also takes somebody who knows you to at least have the guts to answer those as well, or ask them as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things I want to go through.
Sure.
They're probably going to be difficult, but I think that loyal audience members need to have the answer to some specific stuff. And instead of what usually happens where you save the good stuff for last, people have been so patient with the show and spent so much time listening to everything. I want to just jump into some deep shit for you. So apologies.
I think it's the right way to go. You've been threatening this since the beginning. And the other thing too, I want to make this clear as we get into it, is that the way this podcast was written is it began therapeutically for me.
Sure.
So when you listen to most podcasts, if you listen to the Karen Reed podcast or the Diddy podcast, they do it in a linear fashion.
Yeah.
There is very little of that with this, and my apologies to everyone. People have been patient as hell, but you're right. I mean, this is probably the right time to do something.
There was also, I think, in the early episodes, you were just remembering and was just adding stuff from all over the place. So, look, happy you're still alive, but sorry to bring up some bad shit in questions that are about to come. But let me start with this. So, and I appreciate you sort of letting me in on all the questions you're getting from people online and in social media, and the engagement's been great, and that's cool. People are like 99% supportive of you in all your DMs. There's 1% of people who, honestly, I think it's Rachel. She just makes different accounts and shit talks.
Right.
So everyone has empathy. Everyone basically understands, okay, you got scammed and that sucks. But there is one thing that almost nobody can understand, starting with me. You found out that you were getting scammed. You fucking talked to her for another month. How's that possible? There have been people who have owed me $20, and when it went past like the 30-day mark, I'm like, forget it. This person's out of my life. You found out about a 2-year hardcore scam, a 20-year full scam that is the lowest of the low, and then when you found out, you still talked to her for another 30 days. Please explain.
We'll say this about that first. It was longer than 30 days that I spoke with her. It was maybe 60 days. And I
Is
will
that why
say
you told me
this.
30? Because you know if I heard 60, I would just think you've lost your mind. You lost your
Yeah,
mind at 2 days.
I
At
know.
2 days.
I know. I know. Here's the thing. When this happened, I got that phone call from Mark on December 20th of 2023. It literally was 2 years from exactly 2 years from the day that she said to me, I am pregnant and I do have cancer. The cancer has come back. It was 5 days after Mark, Rachel's still husband, caught her at Russ's house. Okay. It was um it was the most unbelievable thing to me. When I got that phone call from Mark, I know you want to talk about the phone call,
Yeah.
but we have to talk about 3 phone calls. It was the phone call I got from Mark, which I didn't take. He left a voicemail. It was a phone call I then had with he and his daughter Madison in the car, and then there was a family meeting which I never talked to you about, which I had with all 4 daughters and Mark, while Rachel was threatening suicide and out on the 41 or the 46 somewhere in Paso. So I'll as you rub your head, I will tell you what I thought, and we can talk about the Mark conversation after that.
Okay.
What I felt is I was due a conversation. I was due an explanation from her. Part of me, the guy that sounds like you just sounded, was wanting to say to her, what the fuck is wrong with you? All I did was love you. All I did was want to be with you. And this is how you paid me back. And I thought, I need a conversation with her. I need to know why. And if I raise my voice, you know enough about me, and people that have been listening may or may not, but I have a presence and I have a voice, and it would be entirely possible that I would scare her off if I said, the fuck is wrong with you? Tell me why you did this to me. Who do you think you are that you would do this to me? And by the way, this was before I knew about any of the other things that we've been uncovering, some of which are on the podcast, some are on social. So I wanted an answer. She said, I can't talk to you right now. This was right after the Mark phone call that I got. So
I can't talk
I,
to you right now. I got to invent some more bullshit.
yeah, you know what, Matt? That's it. That's exactly what it was. I'm sure she was buying time. By the way, that day was Russ's birthday. Russ's birthday is December 20th. She was spending his birthday with him, and this whole thing explodes with me on that day. I firmly believe that's what she had to do. But what she did was she told her oldest daughter, Madison, and she told Mark that she couldn't deal with any of this anymore. She was going to drink and go take herself out on the 41 and crash her car. It was the threat of suicide. This, by the way, this suicide talk track is something that she picked up and used going back to 2013 with me and prior with others. And she just
hands it out like she's handing out Fritos at a party. Like, here you go. Oh, I was going to commit suicide, or I almost committed suicide, or oh, on that day I took pills and I woke up in the hospital. My daughters found me and they called an ambulance. I needed to know, Matt. I wanted to know why she did it. She promised me a phone call. That phone call came on December 23rd. We exchanged a bunch of texts, and she said, "I'll call you at 1:30 in the afternoon." I recorded that conversation. I needed to. California's a two-party state. I'm not going to do anything with it, but I have the recording of that. And I have her on tape saying to me, it wasn't all a lie. When I said, why did you do this? She said, because of Mark. And, and listen, I have one response to that, on December 20th of 2023. But my response today, knowing what I know, is like, because of Mark? What do you mean? Because Mark loved you and wanted to take care of his daughters and wanted to save his marriage after he found you at Russ's house? And after Mark found out you were married to another guy for 3 years while you were married to him, and and another guy fathered your second daughter, that's what if I get a chance to sit with Rachel, maybe there'll be a Dr. Phil, maybe there'll be something where I can go, tell me. But I wanted those answers. But what she told me, Matt, was to further the story of her being a victim of Mark's, basically saying, I've been a prisoner in this home. I said, you weren't, there are two stories here, Rachel. You're a prisoner for 18 months of a cancer scam while you're in the hospital. But what about in 2012 when you told me he beat the shit out of you and you got custody of the girls and he's gone out of your life? You've been perpetuating this lie. That was 2012. It's 2020. That's 11 years. What's wrong with you? What happened to you that you would do this?
So I will give you an excuse for why you talked to her for 2 days after this. Because on day one, she couldn't talk to you because she was at her third man's birthday. And then day two, you talked to her. But then you talked to her for another 58 days.
I did. And listen, I loved her. I loved her more than I'd loved anything in the entire world. And there was still a part of me that felt like I can somehow save her. I can save her from this thing with Mark. Mark really is a bad man. And so I would talk to her. She would send me these messages where she would say, listen, I still love you. I've always loved you. I want to be with you. I'm working on a way to get to you. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to apply for a stewardess job and I'll get to fly out of a hub for American and we can be together. She kept me. I'm sorry. She told me that this is what she wanted. I kept myself thinking she still loves me. She still wants me.
All right. So there's so many terrible things. I've known you too long to be able to tiptoe around all this stuff, so I apologize for that. So clearly she had like some unreal, super deep hooks into you. Okay? Mm-hmm. But also you have told me so many times, and you have mentioned it on the podcast, this was the most beautiful woman I've ever known. I hung out with your first wife for like 7 years, who's way more beautiful than Rachel.
Right.
So
right.
like this infection was in your heart, was in your whatever, but it was also in your eyeballs, like literally eyeballs. Like I'm so interested in what are the hooks? Okay, so obviously she did this to, 6 or 7 guys. She kept Mark. Mark probably, I've never met Mark. I've never talked to Mark. Mark probably wanted to run for the hills 100 times. But what specifically, like, how did she get the hooks into all of you? And then just throw you guys off onto the highway? Like, what what is the secret sauce here to just this kind of manipulation?
She was the nicest person I had ever known. She treated me with kindness and respect, and the way that she talked to me and the way that she appeared to care for me. She knew. I mean, there was something about her that it's almost like she's an expert, like a CIA person. Like she knew, she picked her marks, no pun intended,
Right.
very carefully.
Right.
She knew when she got beaten up by Mark allegedly in 2012 and she got cancer that I would always be around. I wasn't the kind of guy to just walk away. So she worked me, I think, from that period of time. Matt, I don't know. You said to me in a phone call, your picker is fucked.
Right.
And you hung up on me.
Sure.
And you were kind of laughing about it, but you said that, and I thought, man, you're right. I didn't know. Listen, perhaps here's something that was said to me. Maybe I was in love with the idea of being in love, right? But it doesn't excuse continuing to communicate with her. It doesn't excuse like, hey, she did this to you for 18 months and you became a shut-in. You almost killed yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't fucking joke about that. I've talked about it, and I was in a very dark place. And I just thought, if there's a way to see her, at least to see her, I could talk to her and look in her eyes. And I just, as I watched that unfold, I started to grow suspicious when she would say things like, Mark is holding my phone. I can't talk to you. Please don't text me. I'll text you. There were all these little things she was doing. I know we'll talk red flags, but during that 60 days that I was communicating with her, there were all these things that didn't seem right. Because remember, I had talked to Mark once. I heard his tone. I heard his voice. I hadn't met him or seen his face, but I thought, there's something that's not right. So I kept her. It wasn't like I was fully committed at that point, but I was like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And I was also, most people would stop once they found out and they would go, oh my God, I'm running away.
Most people, like 99.9999. I mean, look, no one else that I know has ever been in the situation that you've been in. So I don't know how I would react in the situation. It seems crazy that you still were sort of like, no, I can work this out.
I don't know what's wrong with me that I would do that, other than I just loved her. It was like that scene in Good Will Hunting. Matt Damon leaves a note saying, I got to go see about a girl. I would have gone. I would have driven to Paso to see her, to spend an hour with her, to spend 2 hours to just talk to her in person and to see her face. Imagine how I felt for a moment. I hadn't seen her. I hadn't gotten to hold her hand or kiss her or anything. All I did was want to see her. I thought she was in a wheelchair and paralyzed and had a feeding tube. And yeah, I'm an idiot for continuing it. And I get that takes any bit of credibility that I had with a lot of people and throws it out the window. But I also thought that I could still save her.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a next question?
Yeah, look, the thing that I think the people in the audience need to know, because I've known you for since 1999,
Right.
is that to me the craziest thing about all of this is that of all the people I've ever met, you are the most hyper vigilant, careful, guard up person. The fact that this happened to you specifically is crazy to me, because you're so invested in safety and security and making sure that people are telling the truth. I think of it as when you met her, she was a prostitute, and that's the skill set. It's like, I'm on the job. I'm going to make this person feel like they're the most amazing person in the world so I can take their money. The other part of this that Friends have said to me, all sorts of people, I've seen messages about it. You know, did she get $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 out of you? She was doing this for sport, dude.
The thing that set me off in the end was when Mark came clean about a bunch of things, and then he sent me a text message, which was basically an apology from Rachel saying, I lied to Harry about cancer for attention. It was like Yosemite Sam and Bugs Bunny, when Yosemite Sam's face gets red and red and red, and it just goes all the way through. There's an expression that the prostitutes have. Their customers, they call them a trick, because they're tricking them into thinking that they like him.
Yeah.
Mark, by the way, did say to me, listen, I think she loved you. Well, this was all going on, and he was pissed and I was pissed. He said, I think she cared about you more than you realize. The way she went about it was completely fucked up. And who knows? Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't really care at this moment.
Look,
right?
I guess at this point, you know, in the most bizarre way a relationship has ever happened, I'm glad you and Mark have each other now, you know, for sort of support. It's the craziest, you know, buddy movie I've ever seen in my entire life, but I'm glad, you know, you guys have sort of shared trauma. His a lot longer than yours. Yours probably, you know, worse in some cases. But I think another thing I've seen a lot of messages about that people really want to know about, you know, you've mentioned things on the podcast, but you don't have time to go through like real detail. What are you doing the day you found out? Are you at work? Are you at home? And I know from talking with you probably last June, I know you were thinking, that phone rang. I see that area code. That's someone calling to tell me she's dead.
I'm comedian Negin Farsad, and I know that news and politics can be stressful. But on my podcast, Fake the Nation, we're here to make them calming, even, dare I say, fun. We have panelists like Samantha Bee, Bob the Drag Queen, Margaret Cho, David Cross, all following the news, politics, and culture so you don't have to. Distress the news with Fake the Nation on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Here's what happened. That day, December 20th, it was about 11:45 when I got the phone call from my office. I didn't see the phone call come in. He didn't have my phone number. Madison told him about me, and the way that Madison told him about me was that he picked Madison up from school that day. And on that day, it was 2 days after he showed up at the airport to talk to Rachel after she was caught on December 13th. So December 13th, she's caught at Russ's. December 18th, he goes to work to see her after work and to say, I love you, I want to continue to work this out. He shows up at the parking lot at the San Luis Obispo County Airport, and what does he see? He sees Rachel and Russ embraced and kissing.
Hey.
So he gets out of his car. There's a fist fight at the San Luis Obispo County Airport between Mark and Russ. Mark gets out of his car, they're kissing. Mark's like, who the fuck are you? And Russ is like, oh, you're the guy from the other night. Mark says, I'm her husband. This is that whole, like, I'm her husband. This is one of those, like, no one's gonna win this.
Yeah.
And so Mark goes up, and Mark hits him a couple times, according to Mark, knocks Russ down. Russ gets up. Mark and Russ both wear glasses. Rachel gets in the middle of it, and then Russ punches Mark and hits him and breaks his glasses, and Mark ends up with a cut on his head. At any rate, the fight is over. Mark splits, Rachel splits, Russ splits, all three people separate vehicles, and that's December 18th. Mark picks Madison up on December 20th, and she said, what happened to your... He said, I had a fight with Mom's boyfriend. And Madison said, Harry?
Oh.
And Mark says, who the fuck is Harry?
Oh.
And he says, Russ. Mark says, who's Harry? Madison goes into her phone, finds pictures from 1.5 or 2 years ago of my Instagram account, of a note that she found in Rachel's car that I had left her, pictures on my you know this, we're friends on Instagram.
Yeah.
Pictures of my profile picture was Rachel and I. Couple pictures below it were pictures of Rachel and I. She was my girl, I thought. So Mark is like, the hell? So he looks at the profile, he sees what I do for a living, he tracks me down, he calls my office. I'm sitting having a cigar at 11:45 on December 20th, taking a break from my day, and my phone rings and someone says, "There's Mark so-and-so calling for you." Two thoughts, right? The first is,
Right.
what does he want? Like, how is this conversation going to go? I know me. I know it's not going to go well for him.
Right.
And two, is it possible that Rachel's dead? That the cancer took her? 3 days before, she weighed 66 pounds, and she had stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she was paralyzed, and she had a feeding tube, and. So I didn't take the call. I'm thinking, oh, I need a break. And I'm looking at my Apple Watch, and my heart rate's like, my resting's about 77.
Yeah.
And I'm watching it elevate to, well north of 100. And I wait 10 or 15 minutes, and I go out to my car, and I call him, and I said, "Mark," I said, "Harry," and I gave him my last name. He said, "How you doing, sir?" I said, "Fine." I said, and then he said, "I understand you know my wife." I said, "Listen to me, you fuck." I said, "You're lucky I didn't kill you in 2012 when you beat the shit out of her. I don't know why the fuck you're calling me." I was not my best Harry.
Right.
As my mother would say.
Yeah.
And he said, What is your relationship to Rachel?" And I said, "Not that it's any of your business, but she's my fiance." He says, "Fiance?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "When's the last time you saw her?" I said, "May 5th, 2022, when I left her at the Hotel Santa Barbara, and she went to Twin Cities Hospital to start her outpatient treatment, but she's been in French Hospital for 18 months. And he said, "What?" And he said, "Hold on a second." He said, "I'm not looking for any trouble." And my blood pressure is like, I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, "What, motherfucker? Like, what?
Right.
What do you got?
Yeah.
Let's go."
Yeah.
And he sends me a video, and I open the video, and it's Rachel walking in the house on Ring camera the night before with a half a dozen roses in her hand.
Oh.
And I said, "What is this?" He said, "Do you know the name Russ so-and-so?" And I said, "No."
Right.
He said, "That's Rachel coming into our house the night before, after she got caught at Russ's house doing the crawl of shame, but she was kind enough to bring the roses he gave her home." And I did not know what to say. And he started to ask me questions. It all went black.
Yeah.
It's like getting shot or in a car accident. What happened after that car hit you?
Right.
I don't know. Here's what I know. I look back at texts. I sent him pictures of her in the hospital. I sent him the engagement ring. I sent the application for marriage we had filled out while I was living in SLO. I had sent him pictures of us. Like, I sent him 20 different things. And then we had this conversation that went a half an hour. And then he went and picked Madison up. And then we all had a phone conversation. The topics of which were related to this. I just can't remember them all, but it was crazy. And I remember at one point they were looking for her. And I said, "Where are you looking for her?" And they said, "Well, we're going to the airport." And I said, "Yeah, she works at the airport. She's a lawyer for American." And Madison, the daughter formerly known as Madison, said, she's a what? And I said, "Yeah, she told me she did work for them on a legal case, and she was doing work for them." Madison said, "She's a baggage handler at the airport and a cross-trained agent."
Yeah.
So that was that conversation. I'll tell you about the family meeting if you want.
Let me give you a little lighthearted moment, because you just said, she was a lawyer. I remember that we had a very long conversation, when she had the claws in you.
Right.
And told me about all the stuff she was doing as a lawyer, But she had gone on this big trip. And when she came back from the trip, she pitched the idea to you, Harry, I'm going to buy us a house in a tropical destination. And you sent me photos of the properties that she was looking at, that she was going to buy the two of you.
Was land in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And here's the way that went down. After we picked each other on November 4th of 2021, she went to do a trip to Singapore for this real estate company to be a lawyer for them. And then she came to Vegas the weekend of the 12th and 13th of November. We had dinner at Hank's on Friday night. You love Hank's. Whenever you come to Vegas, we do Hank's.
Yeah.
So I took Rachel there, and that place is my spot. I've been going there for 15 years. And the next day, while we were sitting on my back patio talking, she said, "Let me show you something." And she said, "You remember when I told you I was in New York a couple months ago, and I was on that trip, for real estate there?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Yes." And she said, "After New York, I went to Barbados to go get some money. I have in an offshore account. And then I went and bought some land in the U.S. Virgin Islands." And she showed me a picture on her phone of that land. And I said, "Wow, that's crazy. What are you going to do with that?" She said, "Do you want to build a house with me?" And I thought, I said, "I'm not really in a position to build a beach house in the Virgin Islands." I said, "But thank you for asking, and congratulations on your land."
Right.
And she said, "I didn't say anything about you helping to build the house." She said, "I want to know if you'd like to do this together with us." And I said, "Listen, at this point, I want us to live our lives together. So whatever you do that you want to include me in, I'll be included in." But I started to think to myself, this is just surreal. She's going to go work for this company in Singapore, and she's going to have this land in the Virgin Islands, and she's going to build a property there. And this is just really strange to me. I'm in. I'm along for the ride.
So I think about this often. Do you think like she was watching TV shows, and she'd watch a TV show about a cool lawyer, and then when she needed some new bullshit for you, it was, "Oh yeah, lawyer." And then the following year, she's watching some shit about a helicopter pilot, and you know what I mean? Or is she really just grinding out, "I gotta spend my weekend inventing a new thing to keep Harry stringing along"? Or is she just pulling stuff from the headlines and attaching it to her own life, like the Kristen Smart deal?
I have three different ways to illustrate an answer in my point here. The first one is in the form of a question. Do you see Ricky Stenicki on Amazon?
Yes. Did not think we'd be talking about Ricky Stenicki right now.
But we're going to talk about John Cena's character, because what did they do? These three knuckleheads invent a character, and they go to Atlantic City, and they find John Cena, who's a comedian, and they say, "Oh, this is our guy. This is Ricky Stenicki." For those of you listening or watching, they had developed this fictional character that was doing good deeds all over the planet.
Right.
And when they said to him, we'll pay you to be Ricky Stenicki, he said, "I'm in." They brought him to their hometown, and they gave him book. They gave him his playbook.
Yeah.
And I watched that movie after she was caught, about 3 weeks, and I wanted to vomit. And I thought, this is what she did. She built her own playbook. Part one of that answer. Part two of that answer is that Rachel is obsessed with true crime stories. So when she was in the hospital, I gave her access to my Hulu and my Netflix, and she was constantly watching Dirty John and Inventing Anna and all of those murder shows. The other thing that has dawned on me recently, and I touched on it briefly in a social media post. And by the way, if you're not following on social media and you want some additional insight, just Google the Rachel Cancer Scam, go to Instagram or YouTube and hear me talk about some of this stuff. Sherry Papini and Amanda Riley both happened up the road from Rachel. And while the podcast for Scamanda came out just before mine did, and the Sherry Papini Hulu stuff came out after that, both of those stories broke 2015, 2017. Rachel knew those stories. Rachel knew it. When you watch the Sherry Papini story, and I had to, it took me, normally I can watch a show in a night. I'll sit up for 4 hours and watch a show. It took me 3 days to watch Papini because Sherry Papini had a psychiatrist that made excuses for her lies.
Right. Yeah, I saw that.
And you and I had a conversation about this. At some point, Rachel's going to tell her story, and she's going to find some asshole that's going to make excuses for what happened to her as a child,
Right.
and who's going to justify her lies.
Right.
And Scamanda, Amanda Riley, she only took $100,000. Now, granted, she took it in cash, and she took it from donations. But Rachel, as of the taping of this podcast, owes Cap Slow for donations she took fraudulently about $85,000.
Yeah.
She took a bunch of money from me. She took an engagement ring from me. I spent a lot of money and a lot of time in that hotel and flights back and forth. And there's another guy that we found who I'm still trying to get my arms around this, that she took a lot of money from. The only one guy that she took money from. And by the way, she took an engagement ring from him almost 2 years to the day prior to taking my engagement. And I have an email that Mark saw in her email that says, "It's been 2 years since you said yes. Where are you? Where are you?"
So you mentioned the hotel, and there's been something like people have mentioned to me, when I see messages. I was in Los Angeles with my children, and with plans to drive to Las Vegas to see you, because not only had you gone dark, but you just seemed very it got to the point where my wife asked me, "How's the baby?" 4 different times. And I finally had to say to my wife, I can't ask about the baby anymore because I think the baby's probably dead and I can't ask that question. But I'm in Los Angeles. I'm driving to Vegas to see you, but you're not there because you're in the Home to Suites for 30 days. What are you doing in that hotel for 30 days? What is a day in the life in that hotel for 30 days?
First of all, the Home to Suites is adjacent to Rachel's house. You can walk. It's 3/4 of a mile. It's 15 minutes down the road from the hospital that she was in. But I basically moved into that hotel on December 21st, the day after I found out she had cancer and she was pregnant with our baby. And I did that because I wanted to be there in case the baby needed something, in case she needed something, in case there was a doctor appointment. Essentially, I stayed in that hotel not for 30 days, but I stayed in that hotel until around the 1st of April of 2022.
Jesus Christ. For me, it was it was the end of February when I drove from California to Las Vegas. Yeah.
Here's the story. When you said you were coming to Vegas, I told you I was in California.
Yeah.
This is one of those shitty things. And I didn't want to see anybody.
Sure.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't know she was faking. I just knew she was really sick.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to deal with myself. I couldn't be around myself. And I lied to you because, and I did the same thing to a lot of people in my life because I couldn't be around anybody. I just couldn't. As much as I love this relationship that you and I have had for 26 years. I'm an East Coast guy like you. I've had people in my life since the 4th grade that want to be here, guys that said, "I'll come and get a room at the hotel, and I'll be there and hang out with you," for those kinds of guys.
Yeah.
So I stayed in that hotel waiting to see her. So in the beginning, there were like several nights a week where she would say, we're going to get a sleepover this week.
Yeah.
And she would come. She would come and stay the night, and I would think, oh, this is interesting. What are you telling the girls? She would say, well, I got a sitter, or the girls are okay. Come to find out, what Rachel was doing what Madison admitted to me in her interview, which was she would tell us that she was a nurse, as a traveling nurse, going to Santa Barbara to work overnights in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Which is how she got to Vegas to see me. But she would say, I'm going to Santa Barbara, but she would get in her Yukon, drive over the 101, and park in the hotel parking lot, in the back of the parking lot. And she would come and knock at my door, and she would spend the night. And at 7 o'clock the next morning, she would say, I got to go. And she pretended to the girls that she left Santa Barbara at 5 and got home just in time to do their hair and take them to school. So there were days like that where if she couldn't spend the night, she would come and we would go have lunch, or we would just, be adulting. Then there was this period of time after the fake Mexico trip where she pretended that her daughter was the victim of a sexual assault, her minor daughter. This was an incredibly dark chapter in this story of lies. And she claimed that CPS had demanded that she be attached to her daughter at the hip. I don't want to give a ton of this away because it's either coming up in like episode 17 or 19. I'm talking about it. And we're at episode 14 right now. But during that time, Matt, from February 23rd to the end of March, I would see her a few times a week for an hour or two at a time. I would sit in that hotel room. I was, listen, COVID taught us a lot. I could work remotely and run my business.
Yeah.
But I'd sit by the pool and smoke cigars and work on my iPad, or listen, it was a shitty existence.
Yeah.
I allowed my life to be driven completely off course.
Yeah.
This is her, this shit is her fault, but I own this.
Sure.
I allowed every bit of this to happen.
Yeah. I always, for context, I think I always like on podcasts when I hear when we're recording this and stuff. So I want to let everyone know that we're recording this on Father's Day, June 15th of 2025. Which, the irony of all of that is that, you thought for a good long time after, making it to age 50 without being a father, you were going to have a child. That's a whole, what's in the urn, Harry?
What's in the urn? That's one part of this, but here's the other part. The other part is that I recorded a video and posted it on social media today where I talk about what I talked about at the end of season 1, which is that my father found his own cancer. You know my father. You know his story.
So hold on. Let me just hold on to you for a second. This is the most despicable shit in the Grand Canyon of despicable shit. This might be the most despicable. You can get into it, or let me just, again, Harry's father had and beat cancer. Harry's father spent a lot of time counseling people with cancer. And she used to tell you that she would see your father in her fucking dreams. That is lower than low.
And by the way, she would say that my father had a little baby, a little toddler with him. And that toddler was just walking. I said, how old do you think the toddler is when they're just walking? Because I never had any kids. And she said, probably almost a year. And I said, what does the toddler look like? And she said, brown hair and blue eyes. Just like me, by the way. And if you follow social and look at the ultrasound she sent me, our baby was due to be born August 22nd, 2022. Those conversations about her seeing my father were happening in June of 22. That baby would be coming up on a year old. She was basically saying that my father was coming to her in her dreams, and she was seeing our daughter that she lost in a miscarriage. And she said to me that my father said, and this is the only thing that will cause me to break down. She said to me, my father said to her, I am holding a piece of my son.
Oof. I mean, it's just every time that I talk to you about something or I hear a new episode, like there's a new low. Like, where do the lows end? Like, there's a new low every time. I always think about Mark, like, I don't know Mark, I never talked to Mark. Mark must have had a new low every year for 20 years.
Imagine what the last year and a half since he's met me and since we've uncovered what we've uncovered in life from Mark. And by the way, anytime anyone says to me, I'm so sorry this happened to you, I say, never mind me. What about him?
Right. Because he thought his wife was cheating with someone at the airport. And he's going through that. And then 2 days later, he finds that she's had a relationship with someone for years and years and years. Like, every time I see like Dateline or 2020 now, I think of this. If you lived in slow, maybe someone's dead. Maybe you kill him, maybe he kills you, maybe she kills you guys. Like, somebody's maybe dead.
It's a very interesting point. I want to say a couple things to that.
You know how we all have that one friend we go to with all our financial questions? I'm talking the one who gives you advice like no one else can. Well, meet Experian, your BFF. And by that I mean big financial friend. I'm telling you, Experian is going to be your go-to app when it comes to taking control of your finances. And this big financial friend is always there for you, just hanging out on your phone, where we all kind of are anyway. Experian has a bunch of legit ways to help you save. And get this, the Experian app lets you check your FICO score, matches you with credit cards, and a bunch more totally BFF kind of things to help you manage your finances. Bet your other BFFs can't do all that, huh? Anyway, it's easy to have this big financial friend by your side. Just download the Experian app and get started for free. Trust me, you'll be up to speed with this BFF in no time. Results will vary. Credit offers, approvals, and reward programs based on FICO Score 8 model and subject to lender terms. Offers not available in all states. See Experian.com for details.
First of all, back to my father for a minute. Just one thing. The cherry on the cake of that story is I remember sending my mother a copy of the text exchange between Rachel and I.
Yeah.
And my mother said to me, why won't he come to me in my dreams? They were together since they were 14.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the therapist I had on, who, by the way, used her full name when we did the original interview. And after the interview, she thought about a couple of things, and she said to me in the first interview, and outside of the interview, she said, she's dangerous. Rachel's dangerous. And I always say the same thing. Like, I'm 6'1", I'm 240 pounds. I'm a fucking killer. I've been in karate for 1,000,000 years. Like, I'm not afraid of her.
Yeah.
But the fact is that the therapist backed out of using her name.
Yeah.
But during the conversation with the therapist, we talk about why I fell for it and how I fell for it. And she said, there's this cultural thing that happens. And I'm reminded of The Town when Ben Affleck goes to Jeremy Renner and says, I need your help. We're going to go do something bad and we're going to hurt some people and we can never talk about it again. And Renner says, what?
Sorry, taken. Right.
During the alleged sexual assaults at the hospital.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at a place called the Victory Bar and Cigar on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester, Mass. And I'm telling my buddy Charlie Gallagher, who I've known since the 7th grade, the story about what the doctors are doing to her. I am a wreck. And he puts his hand on my wrist. And he says, we got to go to California and deal with the doctor, don't we? You want me to drive or you want to drive?
Right.
That's where you and I come from. That's the mentality.
Yeah.
And this, if I was in slow, it wouldn't have gone on because I would have gone to her house. I would have found Mark and I would have confronted Mark and said, she got rid of you. There would be no questions. It would be me waiting outside her house and me seeing Mark pull up and me getting out of my car and walking up to him saying, "The fuck are you doing here? She wants no part of you."
Yeah.
And that would have led to whatever happens. The chips fall where they may, as we say. I think that in the end, when people say, what was her end game? I think she wanted me to take him out.
Right. 100%.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I think she wanted me to take him out.
Yeah. I got 1,000 questions, and look, there may be, in season 3, we may do one of these again. after lockup.
By the way, I said to you, I'm done after season 2.
Yeah.
And by the way, for those listening, we're probably going to get to 24 episodes. But when you made a comment to me in text message the other day, you said season 3, semicolon, jail.
Yeah. Right. Season 3. Yeah. I think, as a friend and a listener, like, I know how this ends. I mean, it's just a matter of time. But yeah, season 3 jail is going to be an exciting season. As the guy on The Bachelor would always say, it's going to be the best season ever.
The most exciting episode of The Bachelor ever, Chris Harrison.
All right, so question. At any point, did you think, while you were madly in love, at any point, did your brain come forward and say, I think this is bullshit?
There were a number of red flags starting from the beginning. The Mexico trip, when she pretended to miscarry and she had COVID and she was alleged to have been stuck there. I wanted to get her on a private plane. I wanted to get her home. I wanted to get her out of there. And I called Billy Bush. And Billy said, let me see what I can do. This is awful. And Billy said, where's she staying? I said, she's at Moon Palace. And Billy says, I know those two guys that own that place. Give me a minute. 10 minutes later, I get a message from Billy. We put it on the podcast. Harry Bushy. And then he tells me, like, hey, we got an issue. Yeah. Your girl's not there. Yeah. Red flag. When I told her that, when I said, Billy's trying to get you out of there, she said, well, we're in a special wing. We're technically unregistered. That was one. Number 2, at one point, while she was in the hospital, I ran a very extensive skip trace on Rachel and Mark. And when I pulled that report up, it gave me identifying information about both of them. And the identifying information for addresses matched up to a T, which bothered me because it should have till 2012. But I thought, why are they on the house together in Atascadero? And then I looked the house up in Atascadero. Yeah. And I saw that Mark was on the house. And I said to her, why is Mark on the house in Atascadero? And she said, there's no way he is. That's fraud. So she said, why are you bringing him into our lives? I said, Mark's attached to every single address you've had since 2003. And she said, every time you bring him up, you bring him into our lives. She gaslit me, right? Oh. She gaslit me. Yeah. So here's the worst part of that story. Yeah. Rachel and Mark buy that house on March 15th of 2022. I'm living in the home to suites. I, on March 14th, saw Rachel that day and that evening. On March 15th, she had the transaction with Mark. On the 15th, that night, she came and spent the night with me overnight. Imagine this, buying a house with your wife, and then you leave the house to say you got to go to work, but you're off to see your fiance. By the way, March 15th, that was exactly 30 days after I asked her to marry me and gave her that ring. Go. So, again, every conversation, there's a new low. Here's the thing that comes up a lot. So, maybe I understand, I don't understand any of it. Maybe I understand she's working a boring job, so she's got some time to fuck with you today. Or maybe I understand her husband is out playing golf and she's got 4 hours and she's bored and she's fucking with you. She's on her family vacation in Mexico, fucking with you. How does that even make any sense? You have multiple children. You have a husband. You're in a foreign country. You need time and attention. You probably paid a shitload of money for it. But she's
contacting you from the Moon Palace talking about how she just lost a baby and then
I held the baby, went to the hospital and had it cremated, and then brought me home the ashes. I wrote a eulogy. You'll never see it. I'll never read it. I don't give a shit how much anyone offers me. I mean, I've sent the ashes out. I don't know why I'm spending the money to do this, but I need to know what's in there.
Right.
I need to know what's in there.
Right.
My buddy Phil Ramos, you can Google. This guy's been on 2020. He's been on 48 Hours. He's been on HBO crime shows. He's been in the middle of 330 murder cases in Vegas, including the Tupac case. He said to me, "You got to send those ashes out.
Right.
You just do.
Right.
Just for the sake of doing it."
Well, yeah, and it's also, we've talked about this a few times. It's like, you knew nothing until you knew everything. But now it's like you just can't leave any stone unturned. I mean, we need to know what's in the urn. Do you still have the urn?
I do. It's on my counter. I could get up and get it for you if you want.
No, I
have it. It's here.
I was season 1, episode 1. I was in Las Vegas, and I remember you showing me the urn in your living room.
Yeah.
And I pretended that wasn't fucking insane. And I did a pretty good job of it, because to me, that was just crazy. Now it's sort of funny because I need to know what's in the urn.
The first alleged assault happened in June of 2023. And I remember getting a message from her daughter saying something just happened with my mom. Her fake daughter tells me the whole story. I said, "Listen, you need to call the doctor right now." Hit the call button. Doctor comes in. I said to Rachel, "What's going on? What happened?" She said, "I don't know. There was a doctor here." Rachel's working me every angle. Rachel's the daughter. Rachel's the doctor. Rachel's everything. That day, I'm seeing a guy named Joe Lombardo. Joe Lombardo was the sheriff of Las Vegas for a couple terms and is now the governor of Nevada. I'm seeing Lombardo that day for lunch in downtown Vegas. I'm late for lunch with Lombardo, which is bad. It's not like, "Hey, Joe, I'll meet you at table 34 where we used to go."
Yeah.
And I'm a few minutes late. He's got a security detail. The restaurant has cleared an area. The governor's here. You got your space. So we talk, we visit, and I tell him about Rachel. And then I said, "She was assaulted at the hospital today." And I said, "I communicated with this doctor, and I said, Rachel asked me not to report it to the police." And he put his fork down on that. This is one of those I'll never forget. And he said, "Don't report it to the police."
Right.
He didn't say anything else.
Right.
It's all he needed to say to me.
Right.
So how's the job as governor?
Yeah.
Governor.
Right.
Right.
I just don't understand. Here's the thing. It's like you knew where she lived. You knew you had met the kids. If she lives in Thailand and you live in Vegas and you've never met her before and she's inventing cancer and I'm about to die, you're never going to know anything about it. But like, did it ever occur to her? There's not going to be an obituary. Harry's going to be trying to figure out how he can help the kids. Like,
Did she think this was going to end?
it's almost like it's similar. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme scam.
Yeah.
Whatever I got to do to get the next one going, whatever I got to do to get, so whatever and there's never an end.
And by the way, what she wanted to do when she realized I wasn't going anywhere, after her telling me repeatedly, please leave me, she stopped communicating. A week would go by, 2 weeks would go by. So on December 20th, when Mark and I spoke, I hadn't heard from her in like a week and a half. And by the way, after I hung up with Mark, I sent Rachel a text. And I said, "Hey, do you know Russ so-and-so?" She responded immediately for the first time in weeks. "No,
Right.
Who's that?"
Right.
I said, and then I put his name in capital letters. I said, "So-and-so, Russ so-and-so."
Yeah.
And she said, "I have no idea who that is." And I said, "I just had a long conversation with Mark." And she wrote back and she said, "He's been coming around a lot, starting a lot of trouble." And I said, "He's been coming around where?"
He's been starting a lot of trouble bringing you to Mexico for 2 weeks.
taking care of you, buying you everything you want,
Right.
loving your kids.
Right.
So I said, coming around where? And she said, the girls and starting trouble and all of this stuff. I said, you're not in the hospital right now.
Right.
Where are you?
Right.
Where are you right now?
Yeah.
Long ass pause.
Yeah.
Rachel, I think you owe me an answer. You don't have cancer. You never had cancer. Where are you now? And then she said the magic words. Would you like to say the magic words?
Oh my God. Oh my God. My situation has changed. And what's the second line?
I've chosen not to include you.
My situation has changed and I've chosen not to include you.
One of my favorite lines from the podcast or social media is when I told you that about that line, you said to me, that is an entire psychology class on its own. And I stole your line. Oh my God, you were just caught after 563 days of pretending you had cancer, and your response is, my situation has changed and I have chosen not to include you?
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me right now?
Yeah. Well, look, all I keep thinking in my mind right now is if we wrap this up, that means we'll have to do another one. That means there'll have to be a season 3, and it'll be called Jail. Season 3, Jail.
I'm not committing to season 3. I will do another interview, and listen, I am working diligently, and there's a lot. I mean, we joke, but we're not joking. The reality is that Rachel has committed a number of crimes. On this season, near the end of the season, I am going to read for you, everyone that's listening, I'm going to read for you a report that was done after Mark was arrested in September. That the reason Mark was arrested is because of all these text messages. There was evidence that was manufactured by Rachel. That information, when Mark was arrested, was given to the family court judge. They extended a protective order. Rachel took that protective order and walked across the street from family court in Paso Robles to the police station, filled out a police report. Mark gets arrested, charged with 10 felonies and 9 misdemeanors, and ends up in jail for 10 days. The supplemental police report that ended up coming out was that Rachel concocted a significant amount of that, and I will read from that report so you get a better sense. If all this, the last hour, hasn't been enough, you will get more information. And I want to say one more thing before we're done, and I don't think I said it in the beginning, and that is this. When I told you 6 months after what happened, I didn't text you and say, Matt, I got to talk to you. Please call me. I didn't send you a text and say Rachel lied. I sent you what was the first iteration of episode 1 of this podcast. And I sent you a link, and I sent a message, and that message said, I need to talk to you about something, and I can't talk about it. So I've written something about it. And it was precisely 30 minutes long. And I hit send, and I heard from you in 29 minutes and 50 seconds later. And you said, oh my fucking God. First of all, I'm sorry this happened. Second of all, where's episode 2? Because we're going home from the restaurant, and I've got another 30 minutes on the way home. It was not the response I was waiting for.
Right.
Or hoping for.
But
that's how you found out.
Yeah. We listened to it on the way to a steakhouse. We then stared at each other across the table. My wife was just looking at me like, I think about 10 times she just looked at me like, what the fuck? But then it was, we needed more. You know what I mean? Like, we needed more.
Yeah. And to those of you that are listening that want Matt's connection to this, Matt and I worked together in the radio business. At one point, Matt worked for me. That's how we got introduced, is Matt worked for me. And then at some point you understand the expression, the student becomes the teacher. And when it came time for this podcast, Matt has been instrumental in not only every single episode, but every single word that comes out of my mouth, it goes through Matt. And I want to thank you, because for the first 12 episodes and now into 14 episodes, you have played the most critical role in me telling my story. And for that, I can't thank you enough. And if there was anyone I was going to talk to about this, because I know you've had a million questions, it's you, and we'll do it again.
We're going to look back on all of this when she's in jail. And then what we're going to say to each other is there's only one move now, which is we change the logo to her mugshot.
The new logo is Rachel in an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah.
And with that, next time on The Messenger, the Rachel Cancer Scam, part 1 of 2 parts with an actual employee from the San Luis Obispo County Airport that will speak. Another hidden camera. The voice is going to sound funny, but the tea will continue to get spilled. That's it. We're done.
Good night, everybody.